Take a look at these visuals, the rich, vibrant arcade quality, colour depth, the massive, beautifully detailed sprites, the fluid, cinematic character animations and sweeping layers of parallax scrolling. If you caught a quick glimpse of this on an old school CRT television in the 90s, you would have sworn you were looking at a polished Super Nintendo or Sega Mega Drive game. But it's not. This is running on a home computer that launched in 1987. Today, we're turning our attention to a machine that completely revolutionised the bedroom computing scene in the UK and Europe, the amazing Commodore Amiga, focusing specifically on the absolute king of the 16-bit home computer boom, the Amiga 500. While the rest of the world was fighting with green, monochrome spreadsheets on IBM PCs, Amiga 500 owners were treated to a multimedia powerhouse. But look under the hood and the base hardware constraints were incredibly tight. Developers had to work miracles with a modest 7.09 MHz Motorola 68000 processor, backed by just 512 kilobytes of shared chip RAM. Despite this custom co-processor edge, the Amiga 500 had an incredibly tough hill to climb as the 90s rolled in. It completely lacked native hardware 3D math acceleration, and its planar graphics architecture meant it was fundamentally terrible at drawing the vertical wall slices required for modern shooters or first-person games. That meant if a game wanted to look next generation, it couldn't rely on basic hardware features. The programmers had to manually calculate every single visual exploit, racing the electronic raster gun, abusing the blitter chip for memory copies, and manipulating the copper co-processor line by line, using raw, unrolled assembly code to 2D visual masterpieces created by brilliant assembly wizards who weaponised every single cycle of this classic 1987 architecture. Grab your mouse, insert disc number 1 and boot up the system. These are 16 games that pushed the Commodore Amiga 500 to its absolute limit. Let's take a look under the hood. Let's kick things off with the ultimate 1989 Playground Flex. Reflections Interactive wanted to create a game that would make Sega Mega Drive and Atari ST owners completely reassess their life choices. The result, a scrolling showcase that featured a record-breaking 13 independent layers of parallax scrolling in the outdoor sections. To achieve this at a locked, buttery smooth 50 frames per second on the Amiga's 7 MHz processor, programmers had to split the playfield using the custom copper chip to rewrite the video registers line by line as the CRT raster gun raced down the glass. Throw in giant multi-jointed boss sprites and Psygnosis' signature moody artwork and you have a game that looked like a playable interactive oil painting. When US Gold announced they were porting Capcom's absolute arcade juggernaut to the standard Amiga 500, the entire industry held its breath. How on earth do you cram massive arcade sprites and 16 colour backdrops into a home computer RAM pool? From a purely aesthetic standpoint, Tiertex pulled off a brilliant optical illusion. The character graphics are stunning, the background parallax layers look crisp and the HUD layout feels premium. But once you plug in a joystick, the illusion completely shatters. While it's a fascinating technical showcase of sprite compression, the game plays like an absolute disaster. The frame rate is notoriously bad, the single button controls are awful, and the collision detection is completely broken. It stands as a wild testament to the Amiga 500, proving that you could make a game look almost arcade perfect in 1987, even if playing it felt like total punishment. brothers were famous for creating what the European gaming press called the definitive Amiga aesthetic. The Chaos engine is the ultimate manifestation of that design language. Instead of relying on bright, saturated console colours, the artist used heavy, meticulous pixel art dithering and a highly restricted, grimy metallic colour theory. By masterfully mixing copper-driven palette swaps with dark browns, deep blues and industrial greys, they made a standard 32 colour display look like a rich, atmospheric steampunk world. Every tile is packed with grit and industrial weight, creating a cohesive visual style that has aged flawlessly. Eric Chahi's Another World is a monumental milestone in game design because it completely threw out the rulebook. Instead of spending precious memory on traditional heavy pixel art tiles, Chahi built the entire sci-fi cinematic adventure using rotoscoped vector polygons. Because vectors are just mathematical coordinates rather than massive grids of pixel data, the Amiga 500 could easily scale, flip and warp these geometric shapes on the fly. This allowed for incredibly fluid, lifelike character movements, dramatic camera cuts and giant screen-filling cinematic angles that gave the game an avant-garde, premium cinematic aesthetic that completely blew minds in 1991. Developed by Terramark and running on a standard stock Amiga 500, Elfmania is a game that flat out breaks the rules of OCS hardware. It is a 2D fighting game featuring gargantuan character sprites and stunningly lush, hyper-detailed background textures that look identical to a 16-bit arcade cabinet. The developers pulled this off by completely abandoning standard dual playfield scrolling structures. Instead, they used massive, highly optimised custom blitter routines to manually draw and refresh blocks of background elements on the fly, packing an impossible amount of visual detail into a standard 32 colour display mode. The Amiga 500 was fundamentally designed to be a 2D powerhouse, meaning it lacked any native 3D math or hardware polygon rendering acceleration. Enter legendary coder Jeff Crammond. For Stunt Car Racer, he built a highly optimised raw software vector engine completely from scratch. The game calculates an elevated rollercoaster style track in real time, rendering 3D solid structures on that basic 7 MHz CPU. More impressively, the math engine under the hood actively calculates real-time suspension mechanics, vehicle inertia and hard structural impact physics. It gave players a visceral, terrifying sense of height and speed years before 3D graphics cards became the industry standard. Art and Magic's Agony is arguably the most visually poetic shoot-'em-up ever coded for 16-bit hardware. You control an owl flying through a dark, hyper-detailed fantasy world. The secret weapon here was the Amiga's Extra Half Bright Mode, or EHB. Standard Amiga 500 games usually topped out at 32 indexed colours, but EHB mode allowed the Denise chip to unlock 32 additional colours, which were exact half brightness copies of the original palette. This gave artists 64 colours simultaneously on screen without incurring any CPU overhead or processing lag. The result is a masterclass in pixel dithering and atmospheric lighting on standard 512 kilobyte hardware. Delphine Software took the cinematic polygon concept of another world and fused it back together with hyper-detailed, hand-drawn pixel backgrounds. Flashback features a main character animated using thousands of frames of individual, frame-by-frame, rotoscoped video captures. Conrad runs, leaps, rolls, drops onto ledges and draws his sidearm with a level of organic fluidity that felt entirely futuristic. The engine handles these complex sprite-swapping matrices flawlessly, laying the smooth character movements over lush, atmospheric cyberpunk backdrops that made the Amiga 500 feel less like a home computer and more like a high-end interactive cartoon. By 1993, mainstream 16-bit consoles like the Super Nintendo were dominating 2D platformers. Valiant Software took that personally. To fight back, they wrote a completely bespoke, custom graphics engine for Lionheart that completely shattered standard Amiga tile limitations. It bypassed the standard hardware boundaries to force multiple layers of smooth horizontal scrolling, animated tile sets, and even transparent, wavy water overlay distortions that dynamically skewed pixels using real-time copper timing tricks. Combined with some of the most intricate, beautifully hand-shaded fantasy pixel art ever committed to a floppy disk, Lionheart proved the aging Amiga 500 could still trade blows with the Super Nintendo. Team 17 is synonymous with Amiga mastery, and Project X stands tall as one of their definitive technical achievements. This legendary side-scrolling shoot-'em-up features some of the most crisp metallic spaceships and organic alien obstacles ever rendered on an OCS display. The programming wizards optimised the Amiga's blitter routines to allow for colossal, screen-filling boss ships that move with absolute fluid precision. The engine simultaneously juggles incredibly fast background layer scrolling, multiple weapon projectile paths, and independent particle debris systems. It was notoriously difficult, but visually it was an absolute showcase of Team 17's world-class engineering. While most 3D polygon games on 16-bit computers suffered from choppy, single-digit frame rates, Valiant Software's No Second Prize achieved the absolute impossible. A solid 3D motorcycle racer running at a buttery smooth, blistering frame rate on a stock Amiga 500. The programmers stripped away heavy texture mapping, focusing instead on writing highly optimised vector math routines that calculated flat-shaded 3D polygons at lightning speeds. The result is a visceral, liquid-smooth sense of speed as you lean into corners and race against other drivers, representing one of the absolute greatest assembly programming achievements on the standard Motorola 68000 processor. Factor 5's Turrican II is an absolute masterclass in technical optimisation. The game forces the Amiga 500 to handle massive multi-directional scrolling maps that open up into sprawling caverns, all while maintaining a locked 50Hz refresh rate. When the player transforms into the hyper-fast gyro disc, the engine scrolls the screen at breakneck speeds without a single frame drop or edge-tearing artifact. Designer Manfred Trenz paired this visual speed with optimised sprite multiplexing routines, allowing the game to flood the screen with giant robotic bosses, dozens of enemy drones and complex laser paths simultaneously. It's an arcade-perfect experience running on stock home hardware. Gremlin Graphics' Disposable Hero is a masterclass in organic, biomechanical visual design. This horizontal shoot-'em-up stands out due to its highly unique, multi-jointed enemy bosses. Instead of drawing a boss as one single massive, memory-heavy sprite, the programmers broke the enemies down into smaller, articulated mechanical pieces by using clever sprite-swapping matrices and manipulating the Amiga's custom copper racing beams. These individual limbs can move, rotate and pulse completely independently from the main boss body. It created highly dynamic, intimidating alien threats without triggering the system's strict sprite memory limitations. Arguably the absolute best looking, most structurally impressive 2D fighting game ever released for the base Amiga 500 hardware. Published by Lightshock Software very late in the system's life cycle, Fightin Spirit defied all technical odds. Traditionally, fighting games usually required heavy arcade hardware to animate massive sprites, but this game squeezes giant, incredibly expressive characters right out of a stock Amiga. The programming bypasses standard layout limits to deliver beautiful background layers, independent parallax floor planes and flashy special move effects, all moving with a fluid responsiveness that left other 16-bit console fighting ports completely in the dust. If you glanced at a monitor running Wonderkind's Ruff N Tumble in 1994, you would swear you were looking at a $1,000 SNK Neo Geo arcade cabinet, not a standard home computer. The game is an absolute explosion of visual energy. The developers maximised the Amiga's custom blitter chip, the coprocessor dedicated to rapidly moving blocks of data in memory to throw huge, fluidly animated cartoon sprites, spinning metallic robot limbs and massive particle-heavy explosions onto the screen at the exact same time. There is zero sprite flicker, zero slowdown and a level of micro detail in the metallic textures that remains a high watermark for 16-bit industrial art design. We close out our list with Gremlin Graphics' crowning racing achievement. Lotus 3, the ultimate challenge, is a graphical triumph because it manages to deliver blistering arcade speed, detailed scaling roadside scenery and a full weather system, all while running flawlessly in a 2-player split-screen mode on an Amiga 500. The engine uses advanced raster interrupt tricks to shift the background colour palette per scan line, creating smooth hill gradients and horizon curves. It even features the innovative Rex system, a built-in mathematical track generator that constructs unique, fully functional racing environments on the fly out of simple data strings. It is 16-bit racing perfection. The Amiga 500 wasn't just a computer, it was an entire subculture of bedroom coders and visionary artists pushing silicon to the absolute brink. Which of these graphic marvels blew your mind the most back in the day? I know I'm going to have missed a lot of people's favourites off, but as with the last 2 videos in the series, I'm really excited to hear your feedback and the games you think should have been on the list. So, as always, let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this look at retro hardware wizardry, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more great video games, movies, top 10s and much more. Thanks for watching and until the next time, see ya!
Ooh, videos and I'm in my eye.